Hello and welcome to freephotoshop.com and this week's free video tutorial looking at the dodge tool. Now a few weeks ago I put up a video tutorial on the burn tool and I highly recommend that you go ahead and watch that one before you watch this. And the reason is the dodge tool is the exact same as the burn tool, only it works in reverse. So where the burn tool paints darkness into an image, the dodge tool allows us to paint brightness. For that reason, I'm not going to go through all the general stuff like I did with the burn tool, things like changing the size of the brush and setting brush hardness, because they're exactly the same. Instead, if you're going to follow along with me, then open up the image I provided at freephotoshop.com called Spooky Signs, and I'll show you one of the many ways we can take advantage of this tool. Incidentally, one of the conventional ways you may want to use this tool is for portrait shots, where you want to lighten up the tones in somebody's face. Here in this unconventional example, we're going to lighten up the writing on this billboard that I snapped just outside of Area 51 in Nevada, and then we're going to darken the foreground more than it is already to give ourselves a really cool effect. You'll see when we're done it's going to look great. For now I want you to come over here to the toolbox and click on the toning tools icon, and then from the drop down menu select the dodge tool, and we get pretty much exactly the same options as we did for the burn tool. It's just that everything now is in reverse, so we can set the brush size here, we can select the range from this little drop down, so whether we're trying to brighten the shadows, which are the dark colours, the highlights, which are the light colours, or the midtones, which are all the colours in between light and dark. We can then set the strength of the dodge tool with the exposure control, use the airbrush function, or toggle between the protect tone mode, which turns out to be a new function here inside Photoshop CS4 and a very good one too. So I'm going to start by duplicating the background layer, and I'll do that by using the keyboard shortcut Ctrl J here on the PC or Command J if you're using the Mac. Now I'm aiming to leave the billboard dark and faded out, but at the same time I want to increase the brightness of the letters to give the image a more eerie and spooky appearance. And what that means is that I want to brighten the areas that fall inside the shadows and the midtones. So I'll go ahead and select the midtones option just to be on the safe side, and then I'll set the exposure to something around 40%, which is generally quite a high value. You'll mostly want to set it to a value lower than this, but I'd say that 40% in this example works well for this particular image. In fact, I'm going to make sure that the protect tones option is on up here in the options bar, and that's going to protect the hues changing and the colours flattening out, so it will do its best to maintain the realistic tones that already exist, and 9 times out of 10 it's going to do a really great job. And I should note, just in case you're working with a version of Photoshop before CS4 and you haven't got the protect tones option, you'll need to set the exposure value to something like 5 or 10%. Anyhow, I'm going to set the size of my brush with the bracket keys, and I'll just quickly make sure I'm working with a hard brush by opening up the brush options and then just ensuring the slider is all the way over to the right hand side. That's great. Now I'm going to start painting away on the letters inside the billboard, just like so, and I'm going to take a reasonable amount of care with that, just to make sure that I'm going to avoid hitting into the sky. But as you can see, I'm not too worried about that because I'm going to show you how to repair that kind of stuff before we're done. So generally you're going to want to make sure that you're not going into the sky, but for this example not too fussed, because I will show you a great way of painting back in the original sky when we're done using the dodge tool. And by the way, I'm trying to drag over all the letters before I release the mouse, so I keep the amount of lightness I'm adding constant across the whole image, because you can only reach a certain amount of brightness in each pass, and the brightness you reach will depend upon the exposure value, of course. I'm going to apply one more pass to the letters. It's applying in a series of passes, by the way, because I have the airbrush option turned off. If I turned that on, I'd add more lightness to the area for the duration of the left mouse button being pressed. Okay, that looks good. We're looking just about where we want to be here with this sign at the moment, or with the letters at least. And just so as we remember what we've done here, I'll go ahead and rename the layer by double clicking on the name and calling it mid for midtones, 40 for the exposure value, and then PT for protect tones. So we remember we've got that switched on when we made this adjustment. Great, now let's look and see what the image looked like before the dodge tool came along by turning the layer off, and compare that to what it looks like now. Okay, I'm going to give you an example of just how valuable that protect tones option is. So I'll come over here to the layers panel and I'll activate the background layer, and once again to duplicate it I'll use the keyboard shortcut Control J here on the PC or Command J on the Mac, and I'll also turn the modified layer off so we're back to the original that we're seeing on screen here. Now I'll come up here to the protect tones option and I'm going to turn that off, and now when I paint into the billboard, this time we get nice bright letters, but we also get a lighter background, and that's no good. So I'll hit Control or Command Z to undo that change, and I'll try lowering the exposure value to say 5%. Now I'll paint inside the billboard again, and this time we are indeed getting a more subtle and realistic effect. And by the way, I'm doing this all in one pass, so I have yet to release the mouse. Okay, that looks good. Now let's go ahead and compare the two versions. Here's with protect tones off, and here's with a much larger exposure value and protect tones turned on. And what a difference. You may not be able to see just as good as I'm seeing on my screen here, but when we have protect tones on we get a much better result. And even though there are things we could do with the options to get it looking better, what you're seeing is a general representation of the protect tones option. Basically, if in doubt, leave it on. I'm going to drag the protect tones off version to the trash icon to delete it down here in the layers panel, and now we just want to make sure that the mid 40 PT layer is on and active. I want to finish things off in this video at least by burning some of this foreground back into the image, and we can do that without switching directly to the burn tool by first of all changing our settings up here in the options bar as if we were working with the burn tool. So we want to focus on the shadows, we want to lower the exposure value, and something around 7% is going to work out just great. Make sure that protect tones is on, of course. Now if we were to start painting away, we'd be using the dodge tool, right? To access the burn tool, hold down the Alt key here on the PC or the Option key over on the Mac. Oh, and one quick thing I'm going to do, I'll make sure my brush has a soft edge to it by pressing Shift left bracket 4 times in a row here on the keyboard. Now I'm going to hold down the Alt key on the PC or the Option key on the Mac and start painting away with the burn tool, because that Alt or Option key is going to modify the tool into the burn tool. So if we're using the dodge tool, we'll access the burn tool, and if we're using the burn tool, we'll access the dodge tool. And I'll just go ahead and burn that area back into the image, and that looks much better. Okay, there's one last thing I'd like to do with the modifications, and that's rein the brightness of the letters in. And I'm liking the effect, but I can't help but to think we've gone slightly too far. Now I'm not going to rein them back in this video. I'm going to do that in another video that I'm planning to record straight after this one, where we will look at the ever flexible history panel and history brush right here inside Adobe Photoshop. Well, thanks for joining me here. Before we close up, check out the image before we modified it, and here's the finished product, all thanks to dodging and burning and the amazingly capable protect tones option here inside Photoshop CS4. Well, thanks for joining me, and I'll see you back at freephotoshop.com.